How does Ace Bailey compare to his common comparisons in prep classes, in college, and how will he compare to those guys in his rookie year and beyond? How big of a star will he be on the Utah Jazz? Find out next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Jazz. My name is Leif Thulin. Excited to be back with you, filling in for David Locke on Locked On Jazz. As most of you guys know by now, I'm a lifelong Jazz fan, NBA draft analyst, attendee of the 2023 and 2024 NBA Combine, Jazz broadcast assistant and statistician each of the past 4 seasons, and lover of college basketball. So I'll make sure you know what you need to know about your beloved Jazz as the youth movement carries forward and the Jazz rebuild once more. Thanks for making Locked On Jazz your first listen each and every day. And remember, Locked On Jazz is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Jazz, where the best way to help us grow is to comment anything below. And today's question for you is, who do you think is the best comparison for Ace Bailey in terms of what his NBA career will look like? And is it one of the guys I'll mention today? Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Today on the show, you're in for a treat. I'll compare Ace Bailey to 4 players, maybe, and I'll sneak in a 5th maybe, that I believe his career path could follow, but also looks similar in terms of play style, their athleticism, their build, and in path to the pros. What I mean by that is, how were they heralded when they were amateurs, and how did they perform at each level? And I'll explain if I see his career unfolding similarly to those guys. So let's dive right in. The first guy for me is Michael Porter Jr. And I know that name doesn't sound as good as it used to. It's a name that if you were to look at it in 2019 when he was a rookie, you'd say, yeah, like that's a fantastic comparison because he can be spectacular. His name's been sullied because he's had injury issues and he's been a tertiary, even maybe further down the options in Denver, and it's kind of a want to issue. But let's go through why I believe this is a decent comparison. So I think Ace resembles Michael Porter Jr. in stature, but also in terms of the rare traits of being very good at something that's difficult to be very good at in terms of shooting the basketball at the height that they have. Those are 2 things that are hard to be good at separately. One is being that good of a shooter. Not that many are, no, regardless of height. And 2, if you're that tall, it's even more rare to be that good of a shooter. And though his name is dropped in stock, the guy was a problem in high school, an absolute stud. Now, let's compare the 2 from before their NBA careers, beginning, like I mentioned, in high school. Michael Porter Jr., I know I said his value was sullied and it's lower, but I also want to point out he's still very valuable in a vacuum in the sense that because he can really shoot and is massive, he's going to have a place in the league. That's something that David Locke talked about Ace Bailey in the draft process. He's one of the best shooters in the NBA with height to rebound and who was a double-double guy in playoffs and won an NBA Finals, getting double-doubles fairly regularly. In high school, he was ranked number 1 in his class all the way until Marvin Bagley Jr. Reclassified into the class and claimed the 1 spot, so he was number 2. That class included DeAndre Ayton, Jaren Jackson Jr., Trae Young, Wendell Carter, and many more, including Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but he was lower down the list at that point. And he was primed to be a top 3 pick in what was an amazing class, and is and has been an amazing class that also features Luka Doncic in the NBA before hurting his back and doing so in a completely devastating way. So it's a miracle he's been as good as he's been. Even then, he was still a lottery pick, speaking of his amazing talent, despite a massive red flag glaring injury. Porter, to me, is an even more rare shooter than Ace Bailey, but due to those injury limitations, does not pose the offensive threat as an individual creator and an advantage generator type of scorer that Ace Bailey can be. Despite that being Ace's knock, if you're really getting nitpicky, he's not like super twitchy. Porter was drafted at nearly 20 years old. Ace is 18. He's still 18, and he was drafted a couple months ago. As a rookie, Michael Porter Jr., this is going to get stats heavy for you guys, but hopefully you guys enjoy that. As a rookie, Porter averaged 22.8 points per game, 11.5 rebounds per game per 40 minutes. So that's per 40 minutes on 51% from the field, 42 from three, 83 from the line. That's during his rookie year. That said, his rookie year was after another year of NBA training, as he had a redshirt year, more or less, after playing one game as a rookie. But before you say, wait, that's too good to be true for Ace to perform, Michael Porter Jr. played 60 minutes a game, scoring 9 per game. So that drastically inflates his numbers, though he did shoot fantastically. Like that's ridiculously impressive, shooting 42% as a rookie from deep. Ace, per my projections of last week that I gave the everydayers, I'll repeat them for those who don't know. I predicted he would score 14 points per game, 5.5 boards, an assist on 43% from the field, 36 from three, 78 from the line in 30 minutes. So if you do the math, 30 minutes is 3/4 or 75% of the output per 40 minutes. So you times that by 1.33, and it's 19 points per game and 7.3 per 40 for Ace with those same shooting splits. To me, that would be a monumental success for the Utah Jazz. They'd hit on a draft pick in a big way. Now, the second year of Michael Porter Jr., he scored 19 points per game, 19 of them, and that's without the inflation of per 40. That was on 31 minutes per game. And if Ace could do that, which I think is feasible, but I don't know if he will, I think the Jazz would have an all-star in their hands because Ace has more in the tank than MPJ. Now, let's get into the minutia in terms of what I noticed in film of watching both these players at similar stages of their careers. Ace scores more off isolation. Michael Porter Jr. was never the same after the back injuries because he was an amazing isolation scorer in high school. That said, most of these guys are when they're playing against high schoolers. And he was more of just a shooter coming into the NBA, playing alongside a guy like Nikola Jokic. However, he was an amazing shooter at 6'9", 6'10", and he was unbelievably coveted as an archetype, especially at that point in his career, because there was still intrigue of can he become a better athlete and get back to the old Michael Porter Jr. before the back issues. And just because he was such a rare shooter, and at 6'9", though he was terrible, absolutely awful defensively. Remember how the Jazz picked on him? He still snared 7.3 boards per game. And he had teams thinking, oh no, Denver's got a big three coming with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic and now Michael Porter Jr. Like, that wasn't far-fetched. I actually believed it myself. And Ace, though he's never been a twitch-first guy to score the basketball, I think he's more athletic in a run and jump fashion than Michael Porter Jr. has been since being in the NBA. And I believe Ace will be afforded the opportunity to let Ace rock and will also be a better defender. And I don't think that opportunity was ever afforded Michael Porter Jr. and might actually be afforded Michael Porter Jr. for the first time in Brooklyn. And even in Summer League, I think that Ace demonstrated the ability to sit in a stance and defend, rebound, get there on the weak side and influence shots. And he showed at Rutgers he can block shots. And in Summer League, he showed activity on the glass to create offense for himself and have those slam dunks when the ball wasn't finding him. Michael Porter Jr., I felt like, had his peak when he decided to be a devoted rebounder. I think that's another thing that will really matter for Ace. So a couple last thoughts about this comparison, then we'll move to the next one. I see Ace, if he can replicate those stats, being an all-star quite soon in his NBA career, because those statistics were as the beneficiary of one of the best players in NBA history, Nikola Jokic. Jokic is creating a lot of those great looks and that shooting percentage. I don't think Ace is quite as good a shooter as Michael Porter Jr., but that is not a knock on Ace, and that is just patting Michael Porter Jr. on the back for being a fantastic shooter. I think Ace is a really good shooter and maybe even a more gifted, difficult shot maker than Michael Porter Jr. I see him having more potential in the athleticism, the rebounding, and the defensive side of the ball, as well as maybe more wiggle in the game as he gets stronger. We'll talk about where else he can improve, but I mean, I think it's important to recognize that Ace Bailey is someone that is unlikely to fail in the sense that he's big, he can shoot it, and he has secondary traits that are good in terms of he can rebound and he can block shots. That's really, really rare, and Michael Porter Jr. shows just how much those guys can get paid in the second contract, despite having players ahead of him that are better. The Jazz don't necessarily have that in front of Ace, and with athletic limitations and injury concerns, and he still got paid generously. His stock's plummeted right now, but you'd be happy with that as your guy. And Michael Porter Jr. is the number 10 in win shares in his class, which is a loaded class. So a top 10 player that was picked at 14. Ace has more potential than that guy. And this is a guy marred by injury. I'm pretty high on Ace. We'll talk about 2 former number 2 picks, top high school recruits, and also coming up in the final segment, a perennial all-star under the same lens of how they were as a pro, how they were in college, and what I foresee the differences in their role being for Ace versus those guys. All that and more coming up straight ahead on Locked On Jazz. We've all been there, logging on early, waiting forever to see concert tickets go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Tired of endlessly scrolling to find the best deal? Well, don't worry about that anymore. Game Time's zone deals pick the best seats in your section for you. And if you ever wonder what your view will look like before you buy it, well, don't fret about that any longer, because I can tell you guys about my experience with Game Time getting tickets to the US Open last year to watch some tennis, and I did not want to pull in my way preventing me from watching the best in the world. And I saw exactly what my seats looked like ahead of time due to the panoramic seat view offered on Game Time. So there are no surprises like a pull in front of you from your vantage point as you watch your favorite artist or your favorite athletes. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. Leif Thulin with you here. We're talking Ace Bailey and just how good he can be, and who does he compare to, and who does he compare favorably to. So I wonder if any of you guys knew, based on that hint, who the two second overall picks were that I'm going to compare Ace to. I think many of you will, but the first one is one I think is more like Ace in terms of the rare build and skill set, and that's Brandon Ingram. So let's compare him to Ace from high school forward throughout their careers to this juncture. Brandon Ingram was third in his high school class per ESPN. He was picked second overall behind Ben Simmons. It was Ben Simmons and Skal Labissiere ahead of him in his class, and it was just Ben Simmons ahead of him in the NBA draft. Per 40 minutes in college, I had the per 40 minutes of the NBA for Porter because he didn't play enough of college to take a good sample size of that. But per 40 minutes in college, Brandon Ingram for Duke, and his team was better than Ace's, so take that into account. That was a team that made the Sweet 16. It wasn't one of the better Duke teams. They had Luke Kennard was actually their best player on that team. But I digress. 20 points per game, 20 points per 40 and 8 boards on 44, 41, and 68 shooting splits on 25% usage rate. Brandon Ingram, his stock may not be as high as it once was either, but he's been an all-star in the NBA. And as a result, is 9th in win shares in his class, which you'd say is a success considering he's been on poor teams much of his career. And yet that seems to be underachieving based on where he was picked. But he's always been next to someone who's been the option one, and it's made it an interesting dynamic for what Brandon Ingram does well and how he fits or complements that number one guy, in which case, largely it's been Zion Williamson for his career. And that makes him less dominant numerically. But he is tremendously talented. I still remember him torching the Jazz for nearly 50 in an overtime game when he was with the Pelicans, one of his first years with the Pels. So Ingram went to play his rookie year, and here are his statistics. 9 points, a little over 9 points, I should say. 4 boards, 2 assists on 40, 29 splits. So it's 40 from the field, 29 from 3. Not very good from the field there. Those are the numbers that Jazz fans complain incessantly about with Keontae George, and this is a bigger guy than Keontae, and that's in 29 minutes. I said Ace will play 28 through 32 minutes, so that's a number plot that I think is a pretty good sample size. His second year, as I dig down on this, 16 points per game and 5 boards, 4 assists, 47% from the field, 39 from 3, and that's in 33 minutes. His third year, 18 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, 50% from the field, 33 from the 3. So that was 3 years with the Lakers. His fourth year was his first year on the Pelicans, 24 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, 46% from the field, 39 from three. That's opportunity. And that's an opportunity that I think Ace will be afforded more quickly than Brandon Ingram was. He had to go to somewhere with a greener pasture, so to speak, for him. Ace should have that a little more quickly in his career than did Brandon Ingram. And that is why I'm so optimistic about Ace Bailey, because I think he's going to have better stats earlier. And I think he can put up similar stats by year 2 or 3. Let's say year 3 to Ingram's year 4. My projections for Ace, once again, 14 points per game, 5.5 boards. And so if you extrapolate that out, that's 19 on the per 40. I think he's going to play around 30 minutes per game. I also think Ace and Brandon Ingram, an interesting reason that I think they're comparable and a good comparison is their usage rates were similar in college, and they're similar in stature, meaning that they didn't dominate physically, whereas a guy like Paolo Banchero had high usage rate and was able to push people around despite being a freshman. And they're also identical, or just about identical in age. So I like this comparison for how they project to the future. For those of you curious, in college, Ace Bailey's per 40 was better than Brandon Ingram's. Ace Bailey's per 40 in college was 24 points, 9 boards on 48% from the field, 39 from three with 55% true shooting. And once again, Ingram's was 20 and 8 on 44 and 41 on 25% usage rate. Ace's usage rate is about 27%, I want to say. Let me dig deep and find that for you guys later. But let me skip back to this. So Ace, to me, is the more dynamic athlete than Ingram. Ingram slithers. He's very thin defensively. There was traits that were good, but I think want to was not there. So let's get to the film. Ace is a more enticing defensive prospect. Ingram has more guile. He's a better passer. Ace, to me, is a better and more gifted shooter, and those two are not the same. Ingram is a good, tough shot maker, but he has a range limitation. Ace is a better shooter, higher release, can get more shots, and I think will be far better on the glass. And Ingram will always be a better passer, in my opinion. So now let's discuss role and opportunity. Ace will have more opportunity sooner and should be in a more role conducive to success and more comfortable off the ball than Ingram was, who does his best work off the bounce, snaking off screens, and hitting mid-range jump shots. Ace can play that Tobias Harris role I've outlined and knock down triples all the time that are created by motion and the attention created by Walker Kessler's rolls and Lauri Markkanen's coming off of screens. Like, he can play the Robin role more easily than Brandon Ingram could because he needs the ball to do his thing. So as soon as Brandon Ingram got the full opportunity, he became an all-star in the NBA, despite getting drafted over in the sense that they kept drafting talent and got Zion Williamson. I expect Ace to out-achieve BI in his career. And I also think me saying that makes it so Brandon Ingram's career is seen as poor. But once again, this is a super similar player throughout many stages of their career and all levels of ball, and that bodes well for the Jazz. The fact I have optimism is really good. I think he's going to be better, but like, it would not be the worst thing in the world if he's not much better and he had a similar path to Brandon Ingram. The second overall pick that I'm going to compare him to is one that I think I've seen people compare him to, but I don't think it's quite a perfect comparison. But for the sake of it, I'll continue. That's Brandon Miller. Brandon Miller, who I was very high on in high school, saying he was the best high schooler in that class. And I firmly believed it over Nick Smith, over Derek Lively, guys like that. He was ranked outside the top 10 much of the year. He was ranked outside the top 15 by some. He finished number 9 in ESPN. I was firmly a believer in Brandon Ingram, and I unlocked on NBA Big Board. There's records of me saying that. And I love Brandon Ingram. But that said, Brandon Miller. I love Brandon Miller. I thought he was fantastic. That said, I firmly believe in Ace more than I do Brandon Miller, because for two reasons to begin with. And one of them is not less about basketball and the other is about basketball. Miller was nearly 21 years old when he was drafted. Imagine being 19 and a half when you're playing high school basketball and you're a blue chip recruit. Like, you're going to dominate. Of course you did. That's why I loved watching him. He was a savant out there and still shot difficult shots. And I was like, what is he doing? It's just too easy for him. Ace is still 18 years old after playing a year of college basketball. That is a massive difference. Secondly, Ace has a more poppy game in the sense that he's got more vertical ability to impact the game and should be better on defense due to a little more size and more ability to round out his stature to become more athletic. Miller was a stud at Bama. Don't get me wrong. And his per 40s were very good. 23 and 10 on 43, 38, and 86 splits with a 58% true shooting. Miller had a 26% usage rate that compared nicely to Ace's 28. I just found that for you guys. Sorry for the delay. Is nearly 28% usage rate. So Ace a little more aggressive. That said, Ace was on a poor team and Miller was on a number one seed, the number one overall seed, in fact. And now Brandon Miller in the NBA, he scored, he played 32 minutes per game, so a little more than I project for Ace, but in the same ballpark. 17 points per game his rookie year, 4 boards on 44% from the field, 37% from three. And then his sophomore year in the NBA, 21 points per game. Granted, he only played 27 games this year. 5 boards, 4 assists, 40% from the field, 36 from three. Miller, to me, the reason that this is comparable, even though I don't think their games are 1-to-1, is that he will be in a situation more similar to Ace Bailey's than any of the previous guys, either Michael Porter Jr. or Brandon Ingram, in the sense that the team was terrible, and Miller had the ball in his hands more than most of these other guys I've mentioned did because he was given the opportunity to shine. Miller is also older than Ace is, and therefore I think there's a easier way to ease him into the game and have the ball in his hands. And he also had his path more clearly determined as a scorer, meaning he'd get more shots sooner than I think Ace will, due to LaMelo Ball being a passer, missing plenty of time, and the other Hornets' top talents being traded. Like PJ Washington was dealt to the Mavs, and that made a huge difference and created more time. And it opened more shots to be taken, not in terms of quality of shot, but he got more of those shots that were left vacant by the departures of players on his team. Secondly, and perhaps more importantly for Ace Bailey, the Hornets didn't have a Lauri Markkanen who plays are designed for. And that said, Miller can score on one-on-one. But the question for me on Brandon Miller, as he pertains to like being how an all-star, can he be an all-star? It's how well can he score the basketball? And like he's going to score 21. He's going to score more than that. But can he do it adding diversity? Are they actually important points in leverage moments of the game? And that'll be the question for Ace too, to add more to his game. But can he also add more to his game, become more dynamic athletically? That was my knock for him, and that's why I didn't think he'd be Paul George, who he's likened to plenty of times and was in my initial comparison for him when I saw him play in high school. I don't think he's that level of athlete. I don't think Ace is necessarily either. However, Ace has more pop to his game. Ace would be lucky to score like Brandon Miller did in his first 2 years, but Ace is very young and, to me, a better athlete, more toolsy and more gifted player. And I'm higher on Ace than I was on Brandon Miller. And Brandon Miller is 9th in his class in win shares, despite an awful team, despite not playing as many games. And to me, that's a great success. How bad his team is, missing games, is 9th, so he's top 10. And I think Ace is better. The Jazz should be delighted about that. I also think that there's a world where Brandon Miller, once the Hornets find someone that's better with the ball, ends up relegated further down. I don't see that happening as much to Ace. I think Ace is going to play the lowest in terms of scouting report from the other team, like lowest on the depth chart of who's going to beat us will be his rookie year. I think Brandon Miller is going to have a point of his career where he plateaus. I don't see that for Ace, at least not yet. Lastly, we're going to check in on a perennial all-star that Ace resembles to me. And maybe I'll touch on one more than perennial all-star, all-time great, that Ace's collegiate numbers, they're not as good, but they at least look similar to. And that and much, much more straight ahead on Locked On. Let me tell you about Murdoch Hyundai. Murdoch's, they've been in Utah for over 80 years. They're reliable. They're fantastic. Hyundai's the best car for your money. The safety features, bells, whistles, all in amazing cars, all for amazing prices. The SUV lineup, you've heard all about it from us. The Kona, the Tucson, I've driven the Tucson and love it. They also have the Santa Fe and the Palisade, all of them getting amazing reviews. But also, I can give you a testimonial of how up-to-date these things are. You take a blinker and you go left, and there's a circle that illuminates and tells you what's on your left, and it beeps if there's something there you do not see. Like, they're safe, and they have it all affordable for you guys to see it, and it's not additional to have all these things in your car. They also have the Ioniq 6. It's new, it's amazing, it's electric, looks like a Porsche, and just won the World Car of the Year. And there are 3 locations. I go to the one in Murray. There's also one in Linden and Logan, and all of these guys are great. So make sure you mention you listen to Locked On Jazz, and they'll take even better care of you. I did that, and one guy even there recognized me as a fill-in host on Locked On Jazz, made me feel great, and they gave me a great time in the Tucson. So I advise you to do the same. All righty, final segment on Locked On Jazz. Leif Thulin with you here. And without further ado, the last player to compare Ace Bailey to is Paul George. They had different paths to stardom. Like that much is very true. Paul George went to Fresno State. He was the 10th pick of the draft. Ace Bailey was the number 2 player in his class and was a 5-star. Like, they're very different. However, Paul George had a sophomore year that I think resembles what Ace Bailey did. He had 17 points per game, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 42% from the field, 35% from 3, 91 from the free throw line. He was picked 10th. Paul George, we know how great he is, but statistically, just to stay consistent, he has the most win shares of his class, and that's not terribly surprising. Number 1 in that class was John Wall. He flamed out a bit earlier. Number 2 in the class may surprise you guys. It might be a little salt in the wound, though. It's Gordon Hayward, former Jazz man, picked 1 pick ahead of Paul George. His rookie year was one with just 19 starts, so bear with me as I go through the progression of Paul George. 19 starts, 8 points, 4 rebounds, 45% from the field, 30 from 3. Surprisingly low for Paul George. Second year, 12 points, 6 boards, 44 from the field, 38 from 3. That's pretty good. I wouldn't be stunned if that's kind of what Ace Bailey's numbers are. Paul George was also only 20 when he got to the NBA as a sophomore, so he wasn't too much older. Third year was when he became the all-star that we know. And this is when he had his coming out party, played LeBron in the Heat, and he was great. 17 points, 8 boards, 4 assists, 42% from the field, 36% from 3, top 10 in the defensive player of the year, and he was an all-star. He was second team all defense that year. To that point, from year 1 to year 2, he went up 9 minutes per game, and from year 2 to 3, he went 9 more minutes again. So the numbers for Ace, in terms of just the pure numerical output for Paul George, those are attainable. However, impact I don't think is attainable, at least not in year 1 or year 2 to what Paul George was in year 3. I don't think he's an all-star. But because of the inflated pace, I think it's attainable for Ace to score 18 in year 2. I really do. I think it would be spectacular if he had the same impact as Paul George had by year 3. I think it would be spectacular if he had the same impact that Paul George did in year 2, honestly. Paul George was really good and a fantastic defender. The reason I bring up Paul George, though, is he and Kevin Durant, to a different level, are the torchbearers for slender scorers that you draft and you say, oh, they can be Kevin Durant, they can be Paul George. And I think Ace Bailey is one of the few guys, much like Brandon Ingram, that is an all-star level candidate and isn't just said like, oh, yeah, he can be these guys because he's slender. I think he has the rare enough skills as a shooter, a shot maker, a shot creator, that it's not the craziest thing to put him in that same realm. He's not there yet. Of course not. But I do think it's possible. Differences, though, I want to point out is I think Ace can have a career like Paul George in the sense of he may be able to score a ton. I don't know if he'll ever be able to be the best player on a championship team. I'd hope so. But I don't know if that's the case. But there's one critical difference. Paul George is a lethal rim attacker and fantastic athlete before injuring himself in Indiana. Ace has never shown at any juncture of his career that he's a rim attacker. He's someone I think can score off back cuts. He can catch lobs and do different things, but he's not someone who puts pressure on the rim with his attacking. And I think that's the biggest thing he must incorporate to reach his full ceiling. Ace can shoot it. Ace can rebound. I think Ace can defend. I think Ace is a workaholic who will work on his individual game creation, who can knock down step back turnarounds. He can knock down step back threes. I think he can score in a plethora of ways and will always shoot it well on catch and shoots, and even ones with people in his face. However, I say all that to say this. Ace will be really good, and I think very, very good is possible, and I'm hopeful he can be great for the Utah Jazz. I'm ecstatic to have him at pick 5, but there's things that he can improve upon to put him in this realm that make it so it's actually a discussion. It's not just, oh, he's slender, he was picked in the top 10, therefore he's Paul George or Kevin Durant. I think it's actually worth discussing, and that's why I'm doing it. The keys for Ace Bailey will be patience on offense, not forcing bad shots early in his career. Getting stronger is an enormous one for him that I think will help him get downhill. And I think it opens up new avenues to score, not just shooting the impossible shots that make him so alluring in terms of talent that have you saying, oh my goodness, could he be Tracy McGrady? Could he be Kevin Durant? Could he be Paul George? I will say this as a draft evaluator. The guys like Brandon Miller, like Paolo Banchero, like Jason Tatum. I had Tatum 1, I had Banchero 1, I had Miller ranked very high in his high school class because they could take and make confident shots. The ones that are bad shots, and you say, no, yes. And you say, man, I wish they'd just take the easy one. But in the back of your mind, you're saying, well, if he can do that, and no one's complaining about that shot, that means he's special. Ace has that. And those guys that I mentioned, those are guys I've been very high on in classes, and they've given me pretty good results. I felt that way about Ace. I'm confident about Ace. You just want him to be patient and not force those too early in his career and to let him develop his game at time. And I have no doubt about his work ethic. I have high hopes for Ace. And these player examples should get you believing more in the sense of, I think Ace Bailey can be an all-star. I think Ace Bailey could be even all-NBA at some point in his career. I'm not guaranteeing it, but these numbers are meant to give you belief because I don't think they're out of the realm of a possibility year by year and step by step and in terms of impact. But this should give you belief because these guys are all big and they all can shoot the basketball, and those guys don't fail in the NBA. These guys have been all-stars in the case of Brandon Ingram and Paul George. I think Brandon Miller could be. I think Ace will be. And I don't think Michael Porter Jr. ever will be. But if he hadn't hurt his back, I think he would have been. That's the type of possibility we're getting from the 5th pick. We should be ecstatic. Now, I'm going to talk to you about the most talented scorer I think that's ever played basketball, and his name's Kevin Durant. And I'm going to tell you, per this data plot that I found and further developed for my own liking, Ace Bailey and his per 40s in the college world is about as close to Kevin Durant as anyone else. He's not close, but he's closer than just about anyone else, and that should have you salivating. Ace per 40 in college, I'll remind you, 24-9, 48% from the field, 39 from 3, 55% true shooting. Kevin Durant, who no one in this database has touched, 29, 12, and God, that's unbelievable. 29 points, 12 rebounds. That was also in the Big 12, and that was a very good Big 12 back then. 47% from the field, 40 from 3, 82 from the line. Durant, astounding, fantastic, and he was even younger than Ace. But Ace compares the closest to him of a database that includes a lot of impressive scorers. Brandon Ingram, Brandon Miller, Andrew Wiggins, Rashard Lewis, Jabari Smith, guys like that. Similar guys in terms of build and makeup of how they play their game, shooting the basketball as their main thing, plus athletes, but none spectacular. And I'll leave the parting words. I'm doing this at night, so that'll give me sweet dreams of Ace Bailey being an amazing player for the Utah Jazz, hopefully the transcendent talent that takes us over the top. And I hope it does that for you tomorrow morning, or I guess this morning as I record it, for you guys thinking how great Ace Bailey can be. Let me know what you guys think. Thank you as always for listening, Jazz fans. And please let me know what you think about the reasonable possibilities for Ace Bailey's career and how they compare to my assessments of these players that I compared him to. Thank you guys for listening as always. And thank you for making Locked On Jazz your first listen today. And as always, for your second listen, find Locked On NBA podcast where there is no offseason. Doug, Matt, and Hayes keep you up to date on the contract negotiations, rumors, and everything you need to be you need for yourself to be the most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks again, guys. Have a great day.